Why do you live in a country with the world's greatest medical schools, centers, and technologies, and yet where we have this long history and growing epidemic of chronic disease? I've been asking myself that question for 2 decades, until the last few years when I finally began to uncover what explains it. And when I began to unpack the science behind the explanation, I made a promise to myself that not only would I learn about it, that I would experience it. Last year, I took my wife and I to the lush and rolling hills and seascape of the Mediterranean on a wellness retreat. And it may sound a little crazy, but it just may have saved our lives. Let me explain. This was designed to be a Mediterranean diet retreat, led by healthcare practitioner expats who now live there and raise their family there. And the Mediterranean diet has been voted the #1 diet in the world for the last 2 years based on health outcomes. But what I learned was that there really is no Mediterranean diet without the Mediterranean lifestyle. So what is the difference between the lifestyle of these Mediterraneans and us Americans? In the US, 1 in every 2 people live with at least one chronic disease. That's half of your friends. That's half of your family. That's half of our communities. It's 1/2 too many. And nearly 1 in 3 Americans lives with 2 or more chronic diseases. Now, as a doctor of lifestyle-based naturopathic medicine for 22 years, helping thousands of patients, I saw my patients falling into a trap. I saw my colleagues falling into a trap. I saw myself falling into the trap. Actually, two traps. The trap of the quick fix. You could call it the medical version of shiny object syndrome, chasing the next lab test, the latest supplement, the latest exercise craze. And 2, the trap of medical reductionism. And I'm going to ask you to hold that thought just for a second, because these 2 traps, they distract us from the truest, most powerful ingredients to the antidote of chronic disease. Now, during my week in the Mediterranean, it was full of experiential lessons on slowing down, savoring, connecting, walking, talking, a lot of eating, loving, everything. And it was so stark of a difference to my typical American day and typical American lifestyle that I decided then and there I was going to return home and make some changes to be in more alignment with my health, yes, but with health with meaning, health with longevity, and hopefully health with legacy. Now, thank you for holding that thought from a second ago, because with regards to the chronic epidemic of disease we have in this country, medicine has become reductionistic. What this means is that this is the concept that by reducing or breaking down complex medical or biological phenomena into their many parts, we are much more likely to understand a single cause and devise a single cure. Yet this goes in the face of what Aristotle wrote and taught thousands of years ago, that the whole is more than the sum of its parts. And for our purposes here in medicine, we could say disease is more than the sum of disordered cellular and enzymatic interactions. This concept of holistic medicine, I don't like it. It's a garbage pail term. It means nothing. It's been hijacked and bastardized and is often thought to be at odds with conventional medicine, when in fact what it really means is looking at the disease and looking at the patient as a whole, instead of only focusing on interactions at the cellular level. And yes, even doctors of naturopathic medicine for 2 decades can fall prey to the lure of these 2 traps. The trap of the quick fix and the trap of what we inside our industry call green allopathy, which is essentially replacing a prescription pill for a natural pill, both of which are still reductionistic. In today's medical paradigm, we hear about risk factors for chronic disease. We hear about alcohol, smoking, diet, exercise, obesity. but we don't often hear about psychosocial risk factors, factors that affect us psychologically and socially, because they're often considered to be soft and fluffy, when in fact there is robust biomedical research in these areas that gets overlooked. Why is that? The great integrative medical doctor, Dr. Andrew Weil out of the University of Arizona, has summed up the answer to this question in one beautiful sentence that explains it all. We don't have a healthcare system in this country. We have a disease management system. And the system is broken. We have 7 minutes on average with our doctors. We have health insurance companies making clinical decisions that doctors should be making. And we have a brilliant marketing machine that's come to glamorize the pill for every ill mentality. And we're losing out on this huge opportunity to move the needle on what science has shown us to be the most powerful risk factors to influence disease. And something is being lost in the translation or the transition from the research setting over to the clinical setting, where we interact with patients. So no matter what kind of medicine we practice, we are all in danger of becoming stagnant reductionists if we don't take a step back and a more leveraged view on what science has shown us to be the most powerful ingredients to reduce risk for disease. Where does that leave us? What are the truest antidotes to chronic disease? How do we leverage them? Science has shown us 3 of the most crucial ingredients we must cultivate to live a long, healthy, and meaningful life. Would you like to know what they are? I thought you might. Today I will make the case for love, purpose, and connection. Love, exciting and new. I'm not taking you on the love boat, okay? But what I mean is more than just romantic love. I mean love for our children, love for our friends, love for our pets. When we experience love and joy, we produce a symphony of hormones and chemicals, one of which you may have heard of before called oxytocin, a neuropeptide hormone that's known as the love hormone. It produces feelings of love and trust and bonding. And what you may not know is how it works. It down-regulates our HPA axis, which is our body's response to stress. And research also clearly tells us that we release more oxytocin when we gather socially with people that we like and trust. Now, during my week in the Mediterranean, we gathered socially all day. It's built in to the lifestyle there. We walked the piazzas, the meeting squares, right? Where people talk, meet, sip their coffee, eat their lunch or their breakfast, listen, laugh, cry, connect. It's built into the lifestyle there. And this was our retreat leader, Dr. Michelle Kakunda. I want you to notice one very important thing. Look at the intensity on her face as she's explaining the different colors and the polyphenol content and the smoke points of this olive oil. This is what I'm talking about. Something so simple like olive oil that she grew in her own olive grove, in her own olive, from her own olive trees in her own backyard. This is slowing down. We learned about slow food versus fast food. We even learned about slow wine. Who knew there was a movement about slow wine? We learned to slow down and savor. And this is built in. It's just built into the Mediterranean lifestyle. And so Dan Buettner, a name you may or may not have heard of from TED fame, Blue Zone fame. Blue zones are 5 regions of the world where people live to 100, but live to 100 with vitality. And 2 of these blue zones are in the Mediterranean, one in Italy, one in Greece. And these Mediterraneans are naturally gifted in oxytocin release. Remember, down-regulating our stress response through their hugging and talking and eating and not rushing and slowing down and savoring. So we cannot all, I do not think, pick up and move to the Mediterranean. So here is the key. What are your oxytocin buttons? Maybe it's hugging, laughing with friends, giggling with your kids, listening to music that moves you, giving something away to someone who really needs it, riding a roller coaster, having an adventure. Speaking of adventure, we were fortunate enough in the Mediterranean to visit a tiny town called Ponzano in the heart of Chianti in Tuscany. In this tiny town of Ponzano, there's a famous butcher called the Mad Butcher of Ponzano. His name's Dario Caccini. His story, his life is documented on the Netflix series Chef's Table. And I'll summarize here for you, no matter what your profession, butcher, when you have true and clear purpose in life, you truly live. Dario is what happens when you combine Liberace, AC/DC, and a Brazilian steakhouse. Performance, pizzazz, succulence. And maybe the best part and most memorable, and today still seared into my brain, is when I asked Dario to take a picture with my wife and I. And in his tiny little butcher shop, smaller than this stage, with AC/DC, "You Shook Me All Night Long," blaring in the background as he's running around pouring little sips of wine for his visitors and making sure everyone samples his meats. He comes over and he puts his arm around me, and as the person is fumbling with the camera, he turns and whispers in my ear, "Carne," meat, and then quickly snaps his head back, and just in time for the click, and off he runs. This man's purpose in life is meat, and he's elevated it to world-renowned status, and that sense of purpose in life preserves our physical function as we age, according to research out of Harvard, published in JAMA Psychiatry in 2017. This year out of University of Michigan, research shows us that having a strong and clear purpose in life decreases our risk for death and mortality. Ask your doctor. Purpose could be right for you. And now, will the real vitamin C please stand up? No, not ascorbic acid. Connection. Connection may be the last of these three crucial ingredients, but is not the least. In fact, it may be the most powerful of all. The influence of our social relationships on our risk for mortality is greater than well-established risk factors, meaning the ones you hear about all the time. You don't need to really see this whole chart other than to really notice the red arrow pointing at the longest bars, which is showing the greatest impact on lowering our risk for mortality. Those are our social connections. Greater than alcohol, greater than smoking, greater than exercise, greater than obesity. Social isolation is the leading risk factor for chronic disease that gets overlooked, forgotten, neglected. And the clinical research, the biomedical research, the social genomic research is there showing that social isolation is connected to chronic disease. Yes, I said social genomics. There is a whole field of medicine looking at how our social environment impacts our genome. Think about that. Our genes are affected by whether we feel connected or disconnected. Our genes control our proteins. Our proteins control our immune system. Our immune system produces inflammation, and we know inflammation underlies almost all chronic disease. My point is there's enough research that we need to start doing something about it. What did I do about it? I moved. I moved our home. When we got back from our retreat shortly thereafter, we moved our home with the intention of improving our chances for increased walkability and socialization. Our kids can now walk to school. We can now walk to the town green, whether it's shops, restaurants, cafes, events. We decluttered, we simplified, we downsized. We looked at our social relationships. Where could we strengthen and build those? And after 22 years, I've retired from private practice because my purpose has evolved. It dawned on me, how many more lives could I impact by teaching anyone who is a leader of people towards a more thriving life? I could help 1,000 people one-on-one, or I could help 1,000 leaders help 1,000 people. And now I can impact 1 million people. So I now work with leaders and organizations who believe in these values, and there are a lot of them, these values of love, purpose, and connection, because they want to engage and empower their people to their fullest potential and prevent burnout and overwhelm and re-energize back to their mission. And I also now lead wellness retreats of my own because I want people to have the same immersive time out and experience of what can happen when they become the architect of their own life. Now, it's time for us to start installing these principles into our life, because not only are these the most powerful risk factors, these are the best kind of risk factors. They're modifiable. And I believe that a healthy and thriving life are not built on top of a foundation of food, exercise, supplements, your gut microbiome, or your genetics. Are they important? Absolutely. Are they the most powerful? That's my question. Science has shown us love, purpose, and connection, especially connection, are more medically powerful than your weight, how much you exercise, or what you're addicted to. So how do we do this? Healthcare leaders can help. We can prescribe healthy lifestyle recommendations designed to elicit oxytocin release, remember, and down-regulate our stress response. Business leaders can help. We can turn purpose into profit when we leverage the science of well-being and get the most out of our most valuable asset, our human capital. We can turn, instead of from ROI, we can focus on ROP, return on purpose, ROWB, return on well-being. And you can take responsibility and action yourselves. You can make a list of all those things in your life that bring you joy and that sense of aliveness. These are your oxytocin buttons. Know them. Use them. You can conduct your own purpose checkups. There are great TED Talks on finding your purpose. And last, I challenge you to build more and cultivate more connection in your life in this one simple way. Next time you're scrolling through your social media and you run across a friend, an acquaintance, someone you'd like to become friends with, I want you to do 3 things. I want you to stop, drop, and roll. Stop scrolling, drop the social media, and enroll yourself into a human interaction with them. Now, by the end of my week in the Mediterranean, I was looking like a Mediterranean. I was savoring like a Mediterranean. I was even a talking with my hands like a good Italian Mediterranean. You see, being a doctor may be what I did for 22 years, but now teaching people to savor and experience the power of love and purpose and connection is who I am. Thank you.